all here, and I've got 6 p.m. on Monday, November 15th. So I will call to order this meeting of the Winooski City Council. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Deputy Mayor Al Holston.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We are at agenda review. Are there any questions, concerns about the order of tonight's agenda? Great. Hearing no concerns, I'll move on to public comment. I know we have one virtual attendee. If you are here for an item on the agenda, please hold until we reach that point of the agenda. If you are here to speak to anything else not included on the agenda, please use the raise hand feature. Any members of the public present in Chambers Spring?
Not yet.
Not yet. It could come. We will move on then to the consent agenda. So I'm going to separate these out since Councilor Colston was not here for our previous meeting. We have our liquor control of the city council minutes from November 1st. Are there any concerns about those minutes? Would someone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Brent, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And those abstaining,
Abstaining.
motion carries. Next up are the accounts payable warrants of November 12th and payroll warrant for October 17th to October 30th. Any questions or concerns about the warrants? Would someone like to make a motion to approve?
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hal, are you voting or no?
No.
No, okay. Abstaining.
Nay.
All right, motion carries. And then finally, we have the grants and scholarship policies, which we saw at our last meeting when we were generating approval of, so we put them in the consent agenda. Are there any questions about those policies? All right, would someone like to make a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Brent, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And abstain?
Abstain.
All right, motion carries. That is the end of our consent agenda. So we are at council reports. Mike, can I start with you?
Sure. I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Hal?
Sure. I attended along with a couple of other councilors and the mayor, the joint commission meeting between the State Healthy and Connected People Commission, the Municipal Infrastructure Commission, and the Finance Commission. So this was a first-time meeting to have an opportunity to review the capital project plan that was presented for all the commissions to weigh in on. John Roscher was there to present along with Angela. The budget for the capital projects has grown over the years to its current level, a little more than $1 million per year. Also, the funds are being put aside for future projects such as the Weaver Street Railroad Overpass Bridge. These funds will help meet the 20% match that is usually required by most state and federal funding. While there was strong support for the plan, there was consistent feedback that the multimodal fast project should be highlighted. So it was agreed that the quality of life in Winooski has been improving, and having more bike lanes and safe sidewalks contributes to this important value. John also shared how expensive capital projects can be, and his strategy to help reduce costs is see how we might collaborate with other local municipalities to partner by coordinating work through using similar or the same contractors. And Angela mentioned that there will be access to the ARPA funds that could impact these capital projects. But first, the community will be solicited for input about how to best spend these funds. So all involved in this first joint commission meeting neighbors felt was valuable and meaningful, and that this approach should be used annually going forward to review the city's capital projects. And the three commissions voted unanimously to support the capital project plan and recommend its passage to the city council. Thank you.
Thanks, Hal. Jim?
Thank you. I continued or finished up my participation in multi-stakeholder group with the school, looking at the safety and security recommendations. That work was finished. The final report is forthcoming, and I was in attendance for a presentation of that report at the school board meeting by the consultant Julie Tortilla. So that process is wrapped up, and that is now in the superintendent's hands to move forward.
Thank you. And Bryn?
Hal did such a great job with the summary of the joint commission meeting, so I don't really have too much to add. The next infrastructure committee meeting will be in December. We're working on setting a date and time for that. And we continue to hear from the community the need for striping, and we are certainly looking to leverage those partnerships that Hal mentioned on contracts with our sister municipalities to leverage the opportunity to ensure we're maintaining our striping for the multimodal pedestrian and bike lanes annually, the same way that we do with other annual projects. So outside of that, I don't have anything else to add.
Thanks, Bryn. Just a couple small updates for me. Wanted to let you all know, I think it was in an October meeting, we did an introduction to ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act funding. After conversations with staff, so we had looked at a preliminary outline for public outreach at that meeting. We are going to pause on doing that outreach until town meeting day, and from now until then, let our staff and us focus on all resident voting outreach. We're plenty of time on those funds, and are going to start doing some, we're starting to listen more to our partner organizations, what needs they're seeing, or what our residents are experiencing in the community. Should there be, and one thing we talked about in that discussion was not wanting to sit on this money for a long time in the service of procedure if we don't want urgent needs, and so we are still on the lookout for those within that, if there is something more within that line also before that, more formal outreach process. I also wanted to share, I think it was 2 weekends ago, our Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission hosted an equity summit with a lot of folks from around the county. They worked in consultation with Creative Discourse, who also supported us when we did our equity summit a couple years ago. And some of our staff were there as well. And just one key thing that I thought would be interesting to share out. So the purpose of that meeting was to generate some ideas for efforts countywide, and learn from each other what different municipalities are doing. There was a focus in the information shared on disparities in housing outcomes, and we're going to look at a housing update later in this agenda, but there was a data point shared. There's significant racial disparity in homeownership in our county. 64% of folks who are identified as white in Chittenden County are homeowners versus 36% renter. And for folks who identify as Black or African American, that's flipped to only 17% home and 83% rent. So I wanted to share that out before we get into some other discussion later. Last thing to share, last night I was able to join our equity director and our in-store manager in a meeting with a grassroots multi-level group that included, 2 dozen community members probably. They have been meeting on their own for some time, invited us and folks from the school and to sort of workshop And then we talked to them about community space availability with the O'Brien Center being, the food room being taken over COVID testing and the transition from work in studios. We heard again about that being an issue of concern, and public transportation, and a couple of sort of public works and things that when the environment will bring to staff. Really great to get connected to this group. Wendy shared with them some information on all this voting and talked to them about that being a new initiative coming up, more information coming, potential for folks to actually run the positions. So looking forward to more connection there. That is it for my update, and I'm going to pass it to Wendy for the city update.
Great. Thank you, Mayor and Council. First, a COVID update that is hot off the press. This is just from the Health Department late afternoon. Cases in Chittenden County are up over the most recent 2-week period as compared to the previous 2-week period by 37%, which is a significant increase. There were 97 cases reported in Chittenden County yesterday. It's the highest number of daily cases reported in Chittenden County since the emergence of the Delta variant this past summer. Now, statewide, there were 591 positive COVID-19 lab results reported to the Health Department on Wednesday, the 10th, out of a total of 13,822 tests, which is a percent positivity of 4.3%. 591 is the largest number of new cases reported in a one-day period recorded to date. Case rates in Winooski rose sharply over the last 2-week period, with 15 more cases reported as compared to the previous. Well, it's not good. Ray notes that 15 additional cases in Winooski has a pretty big impact on the rate given the small population. And then on a positive note, there will be a vaccination clinic for young children ages 5 to 11 at the school district tomorrow. The school made sure that those slots were made available to Winooski students. The registration for that has closed. And after I finish the rest of the update, if you have any questions, we can ask Ray, who I think is on the call. So the short message regarding COVID is that it remains a significant issue. We're going to continue to work remotely whenever we can and to require masks at City Hall and other city facilities. More good news, taxes are due today, so thank you all for coming by, those of you who have already. Payments left in the drop box tonight are considered on time, and if it's here before 7:30 or if you make an online payment before 7:30 tomorrow, that payment will also be considered on time. The road resurfacing work at Hood, Russell, and Hawthorne is complete, as is the project on Weaver at the City Hall entrance. So that's very helpful for staff. I want to update you on the Centennial because things are starting to happen in terms of the Centennial planning and action. The Legacy campaign is focusing on Winooski's people, places, and traditions. They're planning a week-long series of events that begin March 7th, 2022, and that will include photo exhibits. And they've started taking those photos. So if you haven't been part of that, there will be a session this Thursday, the 18th, from noon to 3 p.m. in Rotary Park. So please participate and also let people know. The information's on the website, but it would be helpful if you let your neighbors and family know. There's a parking meeting coming up. The Regional Planning Commission will host the 4th Advisory Committee meeting for the Parking Inventory Analysis and Management Plan Wednesday the 17th, beginning at 6 p.m. That meeting will include a discussion of the draft recommendations for inclusion in the plan before the final draft is prepared and forwarded to City Council. And information about that meeting, including the draft plan, is on the project page on this Regional Planning Council's website. So, and good news, I saved this for last. I'm very happy to announce that Jenny Willingham has accepted the city clerk position for the city of Winooski. Jenny brings 20 years of experience in Vermont towns, most recently as the Assistant Town Clerk 2 for the town of Essex. She also held assistant town clerk positions in the towns of Milton and Stowe. And in addition to her extensive municipal experience, Jenny brings a passion for inclusive customer service, and she's very excited to support Winooski's all-resident voting charter change. She's going to start on December 6th, so she and Carol will have lots of time to work together, and Carol can share as much of her 40 years of experience as is humanly possible. So I'm really pleased, and we'll introduce her to you in person sometime soon. So that is what I have. Oh, and if you have any questions about COVID, I believe Ray is on the call.
Are there any questions about that? We have a member of the public join late that did want to make public comment. Would you all be amenable to allowing them to speak at this time? Okay. Paul, can we bring Elizabeth in? Oh, we can hear you.
Okay, maybe you won't be seeing me or just hearing me? That's great. Great. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start. Good evening, my name is Elizabeth Wood. I am a teacher of 2nd and 3rd grade multilingual learners at JFK Elementary here in Winooski. I'm also an organizer with Winooski Mutual Aid. I work very closely with Winooski families outside of the classroom, recognizing that the systems of support that exist for them are not meeting their need, whether it is food security, adequate and safe housing, free childcare, or safe spaces for kids and teens to come together outside of school walls. The recent article and investigation by 7 Days in VPR of substandard housing in Winooski was not surprising to me. I happen to know the Winooski family featured in the article well, both as a teacher of their children and as a student learning Swahili from them. I have myself been in that apartment both when they were living there and more recently with a newly arrived family whose children I have taught they arrived last year. This family and this apartment is not the only apartment I've been invited to see from families who don't understand why they are forced to live in such conditions and why no one is responding when they ask for help, why they are being blamed for the infestations that were there when they first moved in. I have also been asked by families who are desperate to find apartments large enough for their families of 8 who are housed in a 2-bedroom apartment directly coming from Africa for the last 3 years and still searching for housing that they can't afford and doesn't exist anyway. I'm here to ask you to please treat housing as a human right and a priority as these families and their children continue to suffer. And I see it both outside and inside my classroom. So thank you.
Elizabeth, thank you for your comment and for bringing more color and detail to the discussion. We are going to be talking about housing issues shortly. Feel free to stay for that portion, or if you need to go, that's fine too. But this is, we can touch on housing quality and size availability during that discussion.
Okay, thanks very much.
So we are moving to our regular items, and the first one we have on A is for discussion approval. This is the Downtown Winooski local option tax request, following up on our last meeting. Heather, do you want to introduce what we have added tonight?
Yeah, sure. Meredith is coming in to do the presentation on behalf of Downtown Winooski. At your previous meeting on November 1st, City Council received a request from Downtown Winooski for an annual allocation of 5% of the local option tax revenue. Just as a reminder to the community, local option taxes are based on sales and use, meals, rooms, and alcohol receipts, which are directly related to our business's overall success. So they're directly correlated to the services provided by Downtown Winooski in supporting our local businesses. At that meeting, City Council requested further information from the organization, including their plan for business membership, a full budget and list of funding sources besides city-based revenue streams, historical budgets and funding the city has provided historically. And we've attached the MOU so you see when it expires and when we'll renew that. That was part of the discussion as well. And last of all was a summary or list of infrastructure funding that Downtown Winooski has helped the city to secure. So to that end, I have supplied for you in your packets the list of state designation program benefits. And we really do go after a lot of these different funding sources. I've also included for you in your packet a list of the awards that we've received from 2016 until present. This list of grants, it comes out to $1.9 million that the city has directly received as a result of having this downtown designation. In some cases, we're eligible for this because we have a downtown designation. In some cases, we have priority consideration because of the downtown designation, but they all relate back to that. So in addition to the grants that I have shown here, which are just grants that have come specifically to the city, there's another $1 million that has been allocated for projects that unfortunately weren't constructed. So there was more funding. And there are also funds that are directly awarded to businesses. So some of the tax credits for historic rehabilitation, facade improvement, technology tax, those would go directly to a business. So I didn't include them here just because they wouldn't keep our taxpayers' tax bills down. They would go directly to improving those properties, which is also a benefit to the city as a whole. With that, I also have included for you historically what we have given to Winooski on an annual basis. And overall, over the last 6 years, we have provided, the city has provided $193,493.12 as opposed to the $1.9 million in grants that we have brought in. So the cost benefit ratio is 1 to 10. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Meredith to talk through some of the further information that you provided as well.
Thanks, Heather, and thank you for hearing us again, Mayor Lott and council members. We provided the information that you had requested, and honestly, very grateful to have this opportunity to talk to you again. I do think that there is more. Was more information that was needed to present, and again, just happy to be able to provide that. Just to give a little tiny bit more context to the city funding that has come to the organization, I just wanted to bring attention to the very recent history. I think there's been a lot of discussion about sort of the longer history of the organization, the reason that the organization started. But if we talk about quite recent history, 2019, and to now, we, with city staff, basically entirely city staff, designed the new MOU. That is a new piece of the puzzle that wasn't in place before. And that MOU not only showcases what we directly work with with the city, but it also shows just how closely tied downtown Winooski is to the goals and the mission and the vision that the city has put forward in the master plan. And so I think that's really striking. In speaking with other downtown organizations, the alignment is certainly not that strong with other cities for various reasons, but I'm really, really proud of the fact that there's so much direct alignment. And so it really just shows that we, are an independent organization, but that we take what the city's entire goals are very much into our goals as well. And also just in terms of looking at that funding, before, I think it was 2017 was the last time there was a paid staff, and that paid staff was part-time. And then when the organization decided to take another look at their funding and at how the organization would run, they decided to eliminate that position, decided to work with city staff, and decide to draft that MOU. And then in late 2018, came with the idea of hiring someone full-time. So full-time staff came on mid-2019. That was me, spoiler alert. And so I've only been with the organization since summer of 2019. At that time, really was trying to take on the entire MOU and figure out how best to operationalize this wonderful strategic vision that had been put forward by the previous board and the city staff. and obviously, really took it and jumped in the deep end. And then the pandemic hit and we had to shift entirely. And I do think that we continued to fulfill the mission as best as we could. And I do, really grateful to, again, city staff and being able to work closely with them, but also being able to prove and provide our value again through the pandemic, even though a lot of the points that are outlined in the MOU weren't able to be fulfilled due to the pandemic. And now, of course, coming into additional phases of the pandemic, we're shifting again, but really trying to always point back to that MOU, which again is relatively new to this organization, relatively new to this relationship with the city, but I think is incredibly strong foundation. So I just wanted to acknowledge that really recent evolution, that recent history, and that influx of capital from the city was really crucial because there hadn't been a strong foundation in sustainability. And that's really the entire reason that we're coming to you again, is because sustainability of funding will be essential for us to move forward, and also to grab other funding sources and other grants. A lot of these other grants require additional, matching funds and things like that. And so, again, just kind of coming to you with this ask, really grateful for your time and for your attention to this. And we just hope that, by showing our value and by showing that this recent evolution, even just the fact that we now have buy-in and backing from so many businesses and partners in the community, both, we've discussed this, that we have eight out of our 9 board members that are voting are business owners or business leaders. And then we have a lot of other partnerships and relationships with people that are not on our board, but that are fully invested in our organization's success and really believe in what we're doing. So I think in a very short amount of time, our evolution has been really exciting. And certainly I can only speak to the last 2 years, but I'm really excited to where we can go and where we can continue to be very closely aligned with the city in terms of what we put forward to the business community and to the community at large. Any questions? Or Seth or Laura, did you want to pop in with anything before we go for questions?
I'm happy to share just a quick reflection if there's time. Sure. I thought it was great that a member of the public in the last meeting brought up the history of the downtown organization and reference its inception coming as part of the establishment of the TIF district. And it highlights the fact, because I know you all have a really difficult job in deciding how to support a city's infrastructure investments going forward, and that was a big topic in how you created this stream of revenue. But if you think about that for a second, isn't that interesting that the downtown entity was established to help create a tax increment finance district, specifically so that the city could take out debt to build municipal infrastructure that would spur on community development. So our history has always been tied to infrastructure since its inception. And the reason why I think that's been explained in the materials that Heather provided is because the state doesn't want to drop large-scale infrastructure dollars into communities that aren't going to follow that with support to ensure that it's successful beyond just the establishment of large concrete and steel projects. And what's exciting about what Meredith just said is this organization's evolved beyond just being a placeholder to allow us to apply for funds. And that's the success, the success story of downtown Winooski was not always a foregone conclusion. It's very quickly forgotten how tenuous things were when we first established the TIF, and we built it, and at first things did not come. And it was a very uncomfortable period of time, and we had a lot of commercial vacancy. And at that time, the city wasn't particularly welcoming to businesses. We didn't spend money on Heather's position. Our zoning requirements were very opaque, to say it nicely, as well as our permitting processes. And downtown Winooski, in a lot of cases, stepped in to fill that void. That's the reason why one of the founders of Waking Windows is investing their time on the board, because when that was a ramshackle startup, the organization stepped in and ensured that the city and that event worked together really well. And it's the reason why we have business owners as far flung as a representative from the Teigen Street District also participating, because now it's citywide support too. So just want to encourage that perspective. I think Meredith brought a lot of great history up, and I think that the public comments were really supportive actually of the idea that the infrastructure expenditures of the city and this organization actually have a long marriage to each other. So I hope we don't take for granted the fact that the business community is giving back to that in the provision of this tax. Thanks for your time and consideration.
Thank you all. And thanks for coming back with a bunch of new information from our previous request. I also want to note that the request has been revised from our last conversation, right? So previously there was a request for 5% initially with an escalator, which we've removed. And now we're in conversation about just a commitment to the 5% annually. Any incremental increases after that would require an additional discussion and approval by the council. I know we all had some questions last time, so I want to open it up to any counselors. You have any questions about details here, or if anything that you had raised last time has not been addressed? Or Hal, if there's any more background that you need. Brina, go ahead. Is that your hand?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether or not to use the Zoom screen or not for that. Thank you, first and foremost, for putting the additional materials together. I think it helps frame up the ask quite well. I didn't see a list of board members' names in the packet. Was that included?
No, that wasn't included, but I can give you their names right now if you want.
Yeah, I'm just.
It's also available publicly on our website.
Okay.
Would you want me to just name them right now or put a list in the chat?
A list in the chat would be great.
Okay.
Thank you. I noted that the membership fee is only $25, which getting a foot in the door feels reasonable, but I guess I also think like as the success of the businesses goes up, presumably, as we emerge from the pandemic, et cetera, that there should be a measurable ask from business owners to contribute as well. So I would like to see that as a consideration that is brought forward, so that it feels more like equal stake, I guess, or that they're showing that they value the organization as much as we are looking to invest in it as well. I'm trying to look at my notes here. I also am curious about the reason for a percentage again, and not just an annual contribution amount. We talked about this a little bit last time, but I don't feel like that was necessarily captured in the additional materials.
And I can speak to that. It's been discussed in the past. So when this was initiated, Jesse initiated the conversations a couple of years ago. So it's just always been discussed that way. I think there is certainly a possibility. Part of that is about incentivizing the organization to help businesses to grow. And so that percentage would grow for them if in fact they are successful in what they're trying to do. So it's really an incentive, but I think there's also a possibility that we could do a not to exceed number if you were uncomfortable with that.
I guess part of me is thinking about what additional deliverables would we expect from an increased dollar amount with the success of the businesses. So say we see another, looking at the estimates of saying, well, it could be just under 20,000 or it could be closer to 25,000. So what would that additional $5,000 get us? And from what was projected, I guess. So I'm just curious about how the impact of that additional incentive for sales and marketing, and how that would be captured. How would we see that in performance deliverables from the organization?
As businesses grow and more businesses come in, you are expanding by its very nature the support that is being required of downtown Winooski. So, you know, as we have more businesses come in up Main Street, they will be expanding services in the number of businesses that are being served or the size of the businesses being served. So, you know, if you wanted to have specific new deliverables tied to that, we could do that as part of the MOU process. So that's something that could be reevaluated every year as we are going through the MOU again.
You know, and I want to say to Meredith, just your social media post today, capturing what the accomplishments were in 2019, like that would have been awesome to have been in the packet. Because I think that a little bit of a showing what the metrics are, what are the performance metrics. To me, when we say like expanding services, that's like a catch-all. That doesn't really mean much to me. But when I see like the number of businesses served, the number of visits, the number, like those data points, that to me then equates to like, okay, this is what that additional $5,000 is going towards. This is why it's useful to have a percentage and not a flat dollar amount. So that's what I'm trying to get at.
So in our original documentation that we sent over for November 1st, we did include a list of the sort of additional ideas that we had for this funding, additional technical assistance that we could provide, expansion of events, different things like that. But I totally appreciate that, you know, people receive information in different ways, and I will definitely take it into consideration that a kind of infographic presentation would be helpful in the future. So I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, no, and it's just an infographic, but just really summary. To me, it was more like just having the performance metrics. What are your goals, and how does that equate to what we have, what the organization has achieved? So, I was speaking to the social media post today. Is like that was a wonderful way of capturing that. Thank you for the additional explanations.
Thank you.
Well, I wonder if that is something that we could address when we renew the MOU each year, is instead of the MOU runs through like what is being committed to for the next year, we could also request that the organization presents, here's what we achieved over the last year as part of that process.
I think that's very reasonable, considering that we would like to you know, include that information for other funders and also the community at large. So I do think that that is a reasonable request, that we include something like that with the MOU. I think that's wonderful, and I would be happy to do that.
I too, like Bryn, had the business membership dollar amount seems really small, so wanted to hear some background on how that was come to. And then I also wanted to know what the sponsorships line item is in your revenue budget.
Yeah, so we really kept it small because we wanted the buy-in to be equitable. And we are also going to waive that $25 freely. So it might be zero for some people. That being said, the reason why we wanted it to be so small was because we wanted buy-in from the entire community. If we're going to say that we have a business membership, we want it to be a business membership of the community. We want the representation to be across the board. And so that buy-in, we needed it to be pretty small. And then we would certainly, in our presentation of that, make it very clear that larger dollar amounts are expected from larger companies. You know, in our marketing and in our outreach, and quite frankly, on the actual membership page, the communication will be quite clear that this is an open, you know, call for people that want to have a voice in the organization, want to have a vote, and have an invitation to annual meetings and things like that, which hasn't been in the past. We are quite open with our meetings, but the attendance is nothing beyond our board. So we want to make sure that those are really open, and people that are even paying in $0 or $25 feel super welcome. And also, you know, that larger companies will get, you know, the message that this is the baseline, and the reason why we're keeping it so low is because we want to make sure that we're being equitable. We also want the opportunity to show value. So if there's a new business or a business that hasn't really, you know, gotten into the fold, but they're interested and they join at $25, you know, we want them to feel comfortable to join, and then see the value and then raise their money that they're donating in future years. So the doorway, we wanted very few barriers, but then, you know, we'll make sure to pull those people in that we think have more capital for us. And we've already been having conversations with certain stakeholders in the community, letting them know that this is coming down the pipeline, and this is why the numbers are the way they are, but that we expect and hope for a larger commitment from them.
So is that what the sponsorships are?
No,
Like
sponsorships are for things
contributions?
like Winooski Wednesdays,
Okay.
things like that, Halloween.
Okay. Thank you
Holiday
for
pop-up.
sharing that.
Yeah.
I saw Seth went off mute.
But just to speak to methodology too, in making that decision, the board built a grid of all the other downtown organizations in the state and weighed how they approached that fundraising effort and what their thresholds were to get an idea of it. So there is a very model, but just to inform the council that it was a thoughtful conversation that was had that included an analysis of what was going on in other organizations similar in the state.
Thanks for all the background. Jim?
Yes, just echo the thanks for the additional detail in all these materials. It's been really helpful to kind of get a better sense of this proposal in general. I think your explanation makes sense, and I think it's a smart move to have a low barrier to entry for businesses. But I think just to telegraph that when we look at this in a year or more to renew, you know, I think we could be making a decision here tonight that obligates taxpayers now, regardless of the values that they might recognize from that. So I would be wanting to see that met with commitment from the business community to that as well. So I think I just hope that that's a priority for the member businesses to meet taxpayers too in their contributions. I mean, 3 homeowners together are going to be contributing more than the base amount for membership, and I think that's something we got to consider in this as well, because this is such a significant portion of the funding. And that I think is also alleviated by having an incentive-based approach where you're getting a percentage of revenues. I think the businesses can and will rise to meet that call to grow the tax base and thus offset this to taxpayers. I think that you've got a good model and a good case to be made there. We'll just want to be able to see that in a year and a half that's coming to fruition. So that's not really a question, just something I want to share along these lines since we're all talking about the membership fees, because that did jump out at me as well. The only other question I had was around the membership model and thinking about who can be a member. I just wanted to clarify, it seems to me to imply that individuals can be members and individuals can be anyone who's a Winooski resident. At this point, is that intended the way it's read?
Yep.
Okay. And can owners who are residents also be members via their business and as residents?
Like to have 2 votes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that if we come to that, that would be a board discussion. I don't see it as like a menacing issue at this moment. But if it comes to that, I mean, I don't think our board would have any issue of kind of addressing that if it becomes a problem.
It's hard to envision, but I could just curious as I was reading some of the details on the governance. And then finally, your fiscal year is the same as the city's, is that correct?
It's not. We are working right now to make it into a calendar year, primarily because of the farmers market. It is a little bit of a too heavy of a lift to split the farmers market into two. So at this point, we are working to have a calendar year budget.
Thanks.
Mike, I see your hand.
Yeah, say Meredith. You know, Meredith, I appreciate the comment you made about going after additional grants if this 5% gets passed through the council. I think that speaks volumes on where you're kind of going for, and I really like the idea of trying to save, you know, people money, especially the taxpayers of Winooski, by trying to go for. And the line item that you had about the money that was saved on taxpayers of Winooski through the years 2016 to 21, I think that speaks volumes as well. The other comment I have is the membership fee. I like the fact that you started this so low to get some momentum going and get some excitement going in for businesses and seeing how this is going to progress. I almost think like a tier program for the bigger businesses compared to a smaller business, such as a food cart approach could work as well as this gets going and you start tweaking it in the future. The other thing I had for this business memberships, does this go for any business that has a Winooski address that does business in Winooski but outside of Winooski as well?
Yep.
It does. Good to know.
Thank you, Councilor Myers. I just wanted to also touch on a little bit back to what Jim was saying about revisiting this in a year. I think this is the kind of thing that we could add to that infographic, Mayor Lott, where we say, this is how many members we have, and this is how many members went above the membership fee.
Like it.
You know, like there's ways that we can show that easily.
I'm not seeing any more council hands. Are there any questions from members of the public? As a reminder, in Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature or chat if you would like to speak. Bryn, are we still empty in council chambers? Okay. Mike?
One more comment. I also would like to add that as us as councilors or city staff or even the downtown district, if a taxpayer resident says something about, well, this was supposed to keep our property taxes down, we can actually tell them your line item, Meredith, about it has saved taxpayers money on, and this is why we should be getting a percentage back, or this is why we're going to get a percentage back. I think that's important to keep in mind on the forefront if people comment on this, because we had on our last meeting, we did have a resident discuss this, saying, you know, he himself didn't have a problem with getting a one-time ask, but I think as an annual basis, you could do more with what you'll get for your budget.
If I may just say something quickly about that, and thank you for bringing that up, Mike. If in fact this local option tax that comes into the city is over the $450,000 that we projected, it will not cost the taxpayers anything. It is just the local option tax itself coming back. And in addition to that, I did a very quick back of envelope calculation, just in case we hadn't won the $1.9 million. That would be a $497 per year assessment on a taxpayer with a $225,000 home. So, you know, I think it's really important to keep it in that perspective.
Are there any more questions or comments? Based on all the like hypothetical phrasing, I feel like somebody wants to make a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 I think I heard all ayes, so Motion carries. Thank you very much, Downtown Winooski friends.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
All right. So we are going to move on to item B, which Heather will also introduce. This is our quarterly update on our housing goal.
Yes, and I want to preface this with two things. First, I apologize. Your document says that this is the third goal update, and that is what I get for using an old template for the last time that I did an update. This is actually the first update that we're doing on our priorities for this year. And the second thing I'd like to preface is Elizabeth Wood brought up a bunch of big concerns about housing. And I want to be clear that what we're discussing here is strictly reporting on the priorities that were set for this year. There are much bigger housing discussions to be had. And I agree with a lot of the things that Elizabeth mentioned. And those are things that we're discussing at the Housing Commission. So I invite you to attend Housing Commission meetings that are held on the fourth Monday of every month, and those start at 6 p.m. and those are all publicly warned. So there's a lot of discussions going on there that probably won't be covered here in this update on the specific priorities for this year. With that being said, I have presented you a memo which goes over the priorities for this year. And just because this is the first report, I'll run through what those priorities are that were established. These are established by the leadership team in partnership with City Council for each year for our annual work plan. And these are above and beyond regular operations that are going on. These are special initiatives. So for this year, we were tasked with identifying potential funding streams for the Housing Trust Fund, evaluating the effectiveness of the Housing Trust Fund in addressing master plan housing goals, and identifying areas for policy changes, implementing the Champlain Housing Trust Development Agreement and supporting construction of Butternut Station, updating the Public Building Registry Ordinance, evaluating housing quality in Winooski, defined as health and safety of housing in Winooski, and assist Housing Commission with policy work, which is a specific addition that was made by a couple members of the leadership team who are not generally involved in supporting housing. I am the staff liaison for the Housing Commission, so I am always assisting the Housing Commission, but there were specific requests made to Chief John Audie, who is our fire chief and our director of code enforcement, and to Yasmin Gordon, who is our equity director, to participate in that, so this reflects that. There's one other item, form-based code incentives for affordable housing and for energy efficiency were included in our last update. We had them listed originally under the economic vitality goal, but since both of those pertain specifically to housing, I recommend that we bring it into the housing updates and report on it there. So I've included it here instead, and if that's acceptable to City Council, then that's how I will proceed going forward. So I've given you a narrative on all of the priority housing efforts. I'm happy to talk through any of them specifically or answer any specific questions that you have. You'll see that most of them are progressing as planned. Evaluating the effectiveness of the Housing Trust Fund is not progressing yet because it has not been rolled out. Part of that is so that I'm working with multiple partners in order to roll out the Housing Trust Fund, and there are trainings that are required, several trainings that are required. 3 trainings at Opportunities Credit Union, 2 of which have been completed, and the 3rd is being completed in November. That's an internal staff training, so they know how to administer those programs. And then also, I will be working with Yas Gordon, our equity director, to ensure that we do trainings with our partner organizations like USCRI and AALV, so they're aware of the programs and the available funds. And so everyone in our community has access to these funds from rollout. So instead of rolling it out and then getting everything translated and, making equity a second thought, we're making that part of the initial rollout. So it's not, open season on the funds and then, also people who don't speak English as a first language, you can get this later once we have everything translated. So we think that that's an important approach. The other item that is not progressing on the timeline we had expected is updating the public building registry ordinance. And the reason for that is because we are currently in the midst of a grant-funded equity audit of the city, and housing is one of the 3 areas being specifically evaluated. So the findings of that equity audit will feed into how we address our ordinance changes. With that, I'll take any questions or walk you through any of these items if you'd like.
Thanks, Heather. I think based on like the public comment we heard earlier, it might be nice to hear about the effort to evaluate housing quality. And I know Chief Audie isn't here. I know it's like super complicated, some of the issues that are coming up with housing quality, to the extent that you could share anything, or other members of staff.
Yeah, I mean, I can share, and we also have Robert Millar here, who is the chair of the Housing Commission. So Robert, please feel free to jump in whenever you like. We've just started this conversation. So we had Chief Audie and Yaz with us at our previous meeting to kind of talk about the complexity of some of the issues with housing quality. People may not know that the city of Winooski has significantly older housing stock than a lot of the surrounding communities. So it's about on average 20 years older than the housing stock in the county as a whole. And that comes with its own set of issues. So there's much more lead paint in Winooski. There are structural issues. You know, there's aging infrastructure in a community that is a low income, low resource community. So the costs of making those changes to upgrade and get structures where we want them to be are significant costs for some of our moderate income, low income people. So it is a complex situation. There are also issues with sometimes landlords not having resources and supports that they need, and tenants not having, excuse me, the resources that they need. So for example, landlords and tenants not being able to communicate with each other and not having the support to be able to do so. So I think that, you know, we've just opened up this conversation, and we'll be looking at our code enforcement records of what the most common code violations are in the city, health and safety issues that we have in housing, and ways that we can specifically address those. When we put together the Housing Trust Fund, which involves one program which is specifically for home improvements to bring buildings up to code, we looked at the report for the year on the inspections that were done that year through our public building registry and what the most frequent code violations were. And we used those code violations as priorities in that funding criteria for who would get those loans. So, excuse me. So we're starting our work on this, but we're early in the development. Robert, do you want to add anything?
I could, but I do also see Yasmin raising her hand. Could defer.
Thanks, Robert. I appreciate that. I just wanted to, to add a little bit of detail around how housing is being contributed to in the equity audit. We have connected with IBG, who is the consultants the consultant group that we're utilizing for the audit. We've connected them directly with the fire chief, and they have been going over a slew of quantitative data from the fire department, from the firehouse, like firehouse data, code enforcement violations, all of those things, to really take a deep dive into looking at some of the things that Heather was speaking to, where some of the drivers for inequalities have been and where they lie within the city of Winooski. And then what they're going to do is and then the next step is we're creating focus groups we're developing focus groups to bring the community in to talk about their experience with housing in Winooski. We're looking at access, we're looking at quality, we're looking at safety concerns, we're looking at health outcomes as a result of those 4 things as well. And so once the focus groups are done, they will do a qualitative analysis and share both the quantitative and qualitative analysis with you all and with the community as well, to get a feel for whether or not we believe, whether or not the consensus is that, yes, this is really what the picture of Winooski housing looks like. And then to add to that, with their final report that's hopefully targeted towards the end of January, to be completed for the end of January, they will have recommendations as to how to address some of the issues. And one last step that I had forgotten about before they do their final report, they are actually going to look at what the gap is between the outcomes that people are expressing and what we're seeing in the data and our policies, to figure out if there are any policy drivers that are contributing to the inequality that is happening. So it's going to be really robust and really concise. I'm really excited for it, and I think that we'll get at least some answers in January. It's definitely not going to be kind of a magic wand situation, but it's definitely going to aid us in the development of a strategic plan to really address the issues that everyone's talking about.
If I can build on that, actually, I just recently, in this last week, put in 2 applications for additional resources from the state to assist us in moving forward once we have this equity audit. So the findings from the audit, as if we get the funding, will then feed into a municipal planning grant to work with a consultant to create an equitable housing plan for Winooski. So building on the goals that we have as part of the master plan, the housing plan will look at things like resource allocation that we need. We'll look at our ordinances. We'll look at specific bylaws that are creating inequities within our city and highlight those for potential changes. And then in addition to that, and following on that, I've also applied for a bylaw modernization grant. So that will deal with the very specific piece of the bylaws that we find may be creating inequities. So the ways that our zoning is creating barriers to us having equitable housing. And then that grant would then lead to a consultant doing a very, very broad community process to speak about areas where we could change our zoning that would change the outcomes for housing, and get a sense of the community priorities and the community willingness to make some of those changes in order to be a truly equitable housing community.
Robert, did you still have something to layer
on? Honestly, after the 2 of them have been able to talk, I don't know what I could really add. These are very key things that they're talking about that we will need to really do work that is apparently long overdue. I think, I think the only thing that I would add is that although this is a new effort in a lot of ways, this is a problem that has been a known problem for a long time in a lot of ways and needs to be more greatly addressed. And having I've prided this commission, or our commission prides itself on being very data driven. So I'm really looking forward to what we can get from Yasmin and what we can get from the grant that Heather is talking about and all these things, so that we can make some more policy changes that can really affect what it's a long-standing problem. I mean, that's why we moved forward with the rental registry years ago and all of that. And in a lot of ways, we're miles ahead of many communities in Vermont. And but we, a lot of that is mainly just data right now and needs to be turned into clearly action, especially as we've seen perhaps with some particular problem areas, shall we leave it? I think that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to add a little history to that too. We had a housing needs assessment done a number of years ago. The Housing Commission over the last couple of years, since being formed in 2017, initially started with looking at that data, looking at other city data from the inspections, from rental registry, and spent a lot of time really working on the Housing Trust Fund as what was seen as the potentially most impactful policy work that we could do at the time. So having that launch soon will be really exciting. And also just want to make it clear that we have been working on this for a long time. It's just such a massive problem. There's a lot of different angles that we have to keep pressing on. Hal, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make a comment, and I just really want to appreciate all of you who've been moving this forward with this comprehensive approach. Housing is a key social determinant, and if we can make that a positive experience for all of our residents, the city will thrive even more. So thank you for doing this important work.
I also just wanted to add, you know, in Heather's memo, there's the upcoming council role around feedback and guiding to the planning commission. You know, we've been talking about the incentive and form-based code for some time. And to the public comment that was made earlier, we know that 3-bedroom and larger units are unlikely to be built without some subsidy because they're not, you know, you can't get as much money for sale or rent as it costs to build them. And so that's something that I know the Housing Commission has been discussing as something to potentially incentivize. And then, you know, partnership with CHT on Butternut, whatever it's called now. Those being family-sized units as well, because we know that that is a need. So it is something that we have been making some efforts to move the needle on. I do see a hand in the participant list, so we'll open to public comment now, and then we can continue council discussion.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, welcome, Suzanne.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Blaine. I am a owner of a few houses and a landlord here, and I'm not sure if this is exactly the right forum, but I did want to speak to housing and some of the zoning issues that I've come across. So very briefly, about 2 years ago, we put in an application for essentially an accessory dwelling unit, and it has come before the DRB 3 times and is now going to environmental court. And one of the things we're coming across is a disconnect. Can you just stop that for a second? Is a disconnect between the city council goals, the planning commission goals, and then like the DRB and their understanding, and maybe they're not trained. I'm not sure what's going on with the DRB, but you know, we're looking at all of the zoning and looking at it from one perspective, and then the way that any sort of additional structures on a property have to go through DRB. They're under conditional use zoning. Even if you're matching, you know, you're in the RB district, so you want 2 units, that has to go before the DRB. And then they're using like very arbitrary, just sort of their feelings on things rather than any sort of like zoning rules on their rulings, is my experience. And so I guess I'm just trying to say that, like, based on what you're saying, you're looking at this meeting more at like the housing trust goals, but I think that there's also some major issues in terms of like parking rules and some of those other goals like that are happening in the zoning, and just from like the more like individual lot experiences that I'm having with some of my properties.
Thanks, Suzanne. I think that's exactly the kind of thing that we are looking to address in the future, is what are these barriers that are coming up in zoning and process that are stopping us. You know, our master plan outright says we want to encourage and incentivize accessory dwelling units. And so if we're actually positioning it to put barriers up to that, then that's something that we do need to address.
Yeah, I guess the other 2 little things to add are that as we're looking at this, especially from the lens of equity, we have some kind of outdated language in our zoning policy that one of the factors is called character of the neighborhood, with very little definition of how that can be used. And so we believe that that's being used quite unfairly in some cases in our city. And the other thing is that, Yasmin, I was amazed at some of the things that you are doing, and I'm really excited about that. I think some of the data, though, that you're going to be using is inaccurate. My experience just looking at purchasing properties in Winooski is that there's a lot of things that are being rented that are not on the rental registry. So I think there almost needs to be like, if you're actually going to get data, like in a way, a door to door, property by property, like some of the things I've looked at are horrible squalor living conditions in Winooski, and I guarantee those aren't on the rental registry. And one of my properties, when I brought it online as a rental, it took over 6 months and constant like pestering and persistence to get it inspected. So there's definitely, like, as a landlord, a lot that I'm coming across that's kind of clunky and like things that aren't matching across the different like aspects of the governance.
Suzanne, if I can just, from the Housing Commission, this is Heather Carrington, I'm the housing liaison. The Housing Commission has put forward recommendations to the Planning Commission that they, nope, I'm sorry. We are about to put forward recommendations to the Planning Commission. We have a draft memo for them that will go to them in December. That they look at the Zoning for Great Neighborhoods document, the guide that was created at the state level that addresses many of the things that you're discussing. So we have specific highlighted recommendations for things that could change in our zoning. So I think there's a lot more to come in a bigger conversation about that.
Okay, and then like the Planning Commission, do they then advise the DRB or supervise them?
The DRB, and staff jump in if I start to misspeak, the DRB is quasi-judicial, like they kind of stand alone. The Planning Commission helps the council create the regulations, and then the DRB is tasked with implementing them. Eric, if you want to layer in it, I'll feel free.
I would generally say that's correct. The Development Review Board is a quasi-judicial body that reviews very specific applications that come forward for conditional use or for appeals or for other elements such as that subdivisions, things of that nature go to the Development Review Board for their review. Otherwise, they really don't have don't have a role in the planning process. The Planning Commission itself is the body that advises on policy decisions, land use policy decisions to City Council, who ultimately makes the decision on what regulations get adopted.
But they do, we have talked about some touch points between the Planning Commission and DRB chairs, just to share back and forth if there's like, if the DRB is having trouble interpreting certain things, or, if they feel like what they're looking at in zoning is forcing them to make X decision, and then vice versa, Planning Commission can also give feedback to say like, these aren't working out the way that we intended. So like, what do we need to update in zoning to address that?
That's correct.
And Suzanne would be happy to have you come to the Planning Commission when the Housing Commission submits their recommendations. It'll be in December. I'm not sure exactly when.
Okay,
but thank you
I'll
for
be
sharing with us.
Happy to join then. Thank you so much for hearing me.
Thank you. And then I see Elizabeth's hand is raised.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Thank you. So I was just listening to Heather, so thank you for your report. I just thought I'd throw out some caution. I feel like it's very easy to blame new American families who come with limited English skills as a reason why they may be in the circumstances that they are. There was a family who had a roach infestation so bad that it was in behind the electrical outlets. They had leaking roofs that were dripping onto their beds for months. But in Winooski, we have AALV, we have USCRI interpreters, we have community members who are multilingual. So I think the idea that language is a barrier in this community is just an excuse putting the blame on our families. And I think we need to be really thoughtful of understanding where this is coming from, where the blame might need to be put, and that not everyone, that the intent is there. So, thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I want to clarify. We work closely with USCRI and AALV. My issue is the resources aren't there always for them to be able to support as much as is needed in our community. So really, we're pushing for there to be more funding allocated, for there to be more community liaisons, possibly at the city, so that we're able to provide those services in-house. So I think that's what you were hearing when I was talking about there needing to be more supports.
Exactly. I wanted to dovetail off of that, Heather. Yeah, it's certainly not a situation where there's any blame that's being even spoken about. It's about the lack of resources and the missing partnerships, the missing opportunities for partnerships that are then causing or contributing to the inequality and the reason why it's happening. So it's not necessarily looking at blaming any one individual or any partner. It's really looking at where the holes are and looking to address those so that we can bridge gaps to increase the positive housing outcomes for the residents. So that's really what we are focused on. And there is definitely, we have partnerships with USCRI, with the multicultural liaisons at the school. This is a piece of access is what the equity audit is really looking at, and language is definitely a piece of that. And it is part of that is because there are not resources that are readily available at all times, and also landlords who are private entities are not necessarily currently required to provide language services for tenants, and sometimes tenants are not able to access people that they need to be able to communicate with their landlords in a way that is in a timely fashion to be able to address some of the issues. So those are the types of things we're looking at. We're looking at what supports can we give landlords, what supports can we give residents, what supports can we provide as a city to really start to bridge those gaps so that things like that are not happening, and so that people feel like they have what they need to be able to form good partnerships between landlords and residents.
Thanks, Yaz. Elizabeth, was there anything else you wanted to share or ask?
Well, I was going to touch on the developers, but I think I might just save it for the planning commission meeting. So,
sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, I see your hand.
Yeah, I have a quick question. As you mentioned partnerships, or Heather, one of you did, and I'm wondering, where is the refugee resettlement program partnership? It sounds like there's a drop in the ball here somewhere along the lines with the resettlement program, where they're bringing folks into places where they probably shouldn't be leaving them, and they just kind of open the door and say, here you go, we're out of here. And it's up to the community and City Hall to fix the problems. Is there any work that we need to do there, or some follow-up on those folks? Who has that question? Who can answer that question?
So I can definitely speak to that. I think that there's not an answer currently, because that is something that the equity audit is looking at. It's looking at how the city partners with these different organizations and how much reliance we have on them to be able to provide services, and really trying to weigh out how resources can be reallocated on all fronts, not necessarily just at the city, but really looking at our partnerships and how we're utilizing them, and how best to make them more efficient. So that is something that is going to come as a result of the equity audit, with some recommendations on some of those things, on how we can address those issues.
Because I heard a comment, I think it was from Miss Wood, where some folks got into an apartment and they were blamed for the infestation of the apartment, and I think that's a real unfair situation for someone who's just trying to get a new start on life, and all of a sudden they're kind of being ridiculed on their living arrangement. I think maybe some room for follow-up on not just their part. And I'm hoping this audit shows that, or maybe, and I don't want to put it on our code enforcement, but maybe there's some more follow-up means on our code enforcement department to make sure that the folks that own these places, they get the work done in the time they're allotted, instead of having it keep going on and on and on, because that's not a real safe situation for anybody, even for the innocent bystander who has to move out of their apartment because of a situation that's not caused by them.
Mike,
Exactly.
this series of planning exercises, with the audit will come out with some findings. The municipal planning grant will do that equity plan for housing for the city. So that will then specifically look at changes we can make to policy. So whether that be the way that we do code enforcement, whether that be resource allocation, so we're sure that our partners have the resources that they need and we have the resources that we need. I think that will all be part of the series of plans.
And trust me, I'm not trying to point the finger at anybody, especially our code enforcement. Those folks are busy and they do a heck of a job. As a tradesman, I know stuff falls through the cracks sometimes when it comes to this sort of thing, but there's got to be, we got to have a better plan, I think.
Yeah. I think that's why I keep saying equity audit, because really when I want to keep using the term the drivers of inequality, because really that is what we are going to find is going to give us the answers so that we can then create the tools to fix them. So whatever those may be, whether they are policy, whether it's within our policies, whether it's in our code, our code enforcement, whether it's in our zoning, we're going to be able to identify those things that we are all kind of, those big question marks that we all have that you speak to, Mike. And I think that housing is going to be a great priority that is going to come from the results of this audit. It seems like, from now, even with the preliminary data that has been collected, that has been analyzed, the data is definitely taking us in that direction. And I'm really excited for folks to be able to kind of see what that is going to look like come January.
Bryn, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you. I don't want to belabor and get off the topic too much from the intended agenda item, so I'll just kind of keep it short. Echoing a lot of what has been said already, I do think that additional, as it relates to housing stock and safety and quality, I do think that I would like to see in the recommendations for the Planning Commission consideration around frequency of inspections. I don't know what the enforcement protocols are and if there's escalating enforcement, but it would be interesting to see if that's inclusive of revoking or repealing certificate of occupancy. And I believe one of the recent incidents is from a property owner that has rentals in multiple municipalities. I would be interested in seeing if there's a pervasive issue of particular property owners and failure to meet code in multiple municipalities, and whether or not there are additional repercussions for failure to maintain adequate housing that could be elevated to a state level, state health, Department of Health level for further enforcement. Because at some point it's not just impacting one municipality, it's impacting folks across multiple municipalities, and I think that does need to have a ability to be elevated to a higher degree, higher level. So I do want to make sure we include that policy component in some recommendations. One of my grandfather's favorite sayings is, people do what you inspect, not what you expect. So I believe in that thoroughly, and really support putting more resources into code enforcement, because it is a matter of a determinant of health and equity. So I think that it's something that can be underfunded, but I think we need to kind of heed the warnings and make sure that we're being responsive. So thank you.
that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's the kind of data that the Housing Commission will be looking at some point. Yeah, and the audit. Yeah. I'll look forward to seeing that too. Jim?
Thank you. And I just want to thank our public who showed up and the comments and kind of allowing this discussion to wander a little afield of the intended goal updates. But I think, and I also want to thank you, Robert, for being here. It's encouraging to see our commission chair showing up and taking an interest in this type of discussion too. And I think as our discussion has meandered and this update shows that we have a lot to do in the city, and there's only so much that we're going to be able to do. I mean, the answer to what do we need to do to fix housing is going to be way more money than we'll ever have, and way more attention than we can give because of our size and just because we're dealing with so many competing issues. But we are going to have some key discussions that aren't going to be easy coming up over the next 2 years. And so I guess I want to cement this moment to remember that we think this is a priority, and that we're going to have to do some hard work, both as council and with our commissions, with our communities, with our developers, because it's going to be all of that, doing things together. I love the comprehensive vision. I expect many of the things that will come out of that are going to be things that we somewhat know already, but it'll give us a better sense of how to tackle them. And I hope we can be kind of ready to jump on those in incremental steps rather than waiting for everything to come together to do it all at once. I think we do need to start making steps now. And so I don't want to rush things, but I also want us to, I guess I'm encouraging us to be ready to step in and do things when we have the opportunity, especially with ARPA, with TIF, with the upcoming financial pieces, partnership pieces, larger state picture. There's going to be a lot that we could do, and having this comprehensive plan will be good, but it's also going to take quick action from us. And these issues are things that ideally would have been solved 2 months ago, and it's going to take years, but I'm optimistic that with this kind of level of attention and care that you all are showing, that we could actually do some real good here. So thank you, and let's keep going.
Thanks, Jim. Are there any more public comments or questions? Reminder, you can use chat or the raise hand feature. Mike, I see your hand.
Yes. Can I have another topic I want to get on with this housing update? Are we over with the?
Could you hold for a second? Because I
Okay,
think I saw Hillary's hand in the.
Absolutely. Thank
for
you.
a second there. Maybe. Hillary, did you want to speak? Maybe not. It was just there for a second.
The
Okay.
the other thing that caught my eye was has the parking study been finalized yet?
I think it's due January or February.
Because
Yeah.
I was reading the incentives, and parking is always one of the things on my mind. And I want to know where the parking is going to be as a goal on the housing, because as these developers are developing buildings that will not satisfy the parking needs, this all started out as trying to save the neighborhoods from, the gateways. And if we have an invasion of parking on off-street parking, that's going to go blocks down certain neighborhoods, and expect our neighborhoods to stay friendly and user-friendly. I'm concerned about that sort of thing, and I don't see that kind of an update in this housing update. Does anyone have an answer for me on that?
So the recommendations that the Housing Commission shared with planning already included evaluating parking in the incentive somehow. They are waiting for more data, but the recommendations aren't. It's to get development that includes the right amount of parking, not to underprovide. And so preliminary data shows that it's being overprovided to some extent, and that there is room to reduce, particularly in support of our housing goals. We heard from some area developers, certain types of housing have lower parking utilization. So lower income multifamily units tend to have lower number of cars a high-income single-family house or something. Senior housing tends to have fewer vehicles. So that is part of the evaluation, is what tweaks could be made that would still maintain the balance. Are there any other questions on this update? It is just a discussion item. Okay, thank you everyone for very robust discussion. More to come at some soon to come meetings. We can move on to item C. This is on for discussion or approval. This is an all resident voting implementation update with Carol and Yasmin. Who wants to introduce?
Carol, why don't you go ahead?
Carol, you're on mute.
Sorry.
No
We've been
worries.
meeting and going over the all resident voting and some of the recommendations that we had brought to you last week. And we had a few changes. And we also have developed a new voter application for an all resident voting. I know that has been being approved by our attorney. Also, with the new city clerk that'll be coming in, we will be reaching out, going over this update. Probably that's one of the top things that we'll be discussing with her through the all resident voting. And also I have reached out to the Secretary of State's office for the translation of ballots, because that is a big job. They have given me a company called Language Links, where that's where they get their translated ballots translated. And I think that's about it.
Carol, do you mind if I jump in just a sec?
No, you go right ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank you for the update. And that's great to hear that you got the information back from the state's attorney, the state's attorney's office. That's wonderful. Or for the, that's wonderful from the state. So we've been, we've had multiple meetings between myself, the city clerks, and Wendy, our interim city manager, to really make what we feel is a really robust plan for community outreach and engagement for kind of like the pre-election coming up to the election. It involves multiple pathways for folks to get involved. It involves multiple pathways for education in multiple locations. We're really trying to get out into the community to promote registering to vote, to promote the resources and the supports that the city is offering to help people really understand what it means to vote and what voting day will look like for new voters. And so, I believe that the document was attached. We did, like Carol expressed, we did make some changes. She brought the document to the BCA meeting that occurred a couple weeks ago. They provided some input around the actual election day process and around the ballots. So that's also reflected in the changes that are in the document. And we will be, looking to share the document with our community partners coming up, probably after the holidays, when we really start to gear into the outreach portion. So we are going to be leaning on our community partners heavily to be able to get the word out and get the education around. But there's a pretty good plan in place, I think.
Thank you both for putting this together and sharing with us tonight, and also for presenting to the Board of Civil Authority recently to get their input as the folks who run the live action election. I had like a couple of suggestions that I've heard pop up, but want to open it up for questions first. Any questions from council? Jim?
Thank you. And one piece I appreciated is seeing kind of the layout of timing and who's tackling which pieces. And I think that's really clearly laid out. I think one thing that we've talked about before is what our responsibilities as counselors are in this process. And I don't imagine you would commit us to that in a written document like this, but I'm curious if you would have any recommendations, reflections for us that you'd want us to be actively participating in any of these steps, those of us who can.
Right. You know, I think there are a couple of you who unfortunately aren't able to because you're going to be on the ballot this year. So you'll be kind of doing your own things coming up to election season. But, you know, we would really love kind of an all hands on deck approach, especially when it comes to the community outreach and engagement. We are planning what we call, what our lovely Ray Coffee has coined roadshows to go out into the community and kind of set up in targeted locations that pretty much cover the entire city and all of the residents that should be, you know, that could possibly be registering to vote for informational purposes. So it'll be kind of like a take and go tabling that provides community members with translated versions of all of the information around voting and voting day, as well as information around registration for application for voting and how you do that. And so we will need some people power to be able to do that, because we'd love to have folks there to answer any questions. You know, if people have, you know, if they're swinging by the market to pick up their bread and they see us there, you know, they have some questions for us. We would love to have people in person ready to be able to provide answers if possible. So that's something that I would love for the counselors to be able to take part in. Once we come out with that schedule, we haven't developed the schedule yet for what that will look like. So far, we've only identified some key places, some key locations. And then also, you know, we were thinking about utilizing, Carol has shared some of the wonderful videos that they did a few years back that they recorded that are informational videos. And we would love to be able to have those running in locations around the city. So, you know, at workplaces, in all of the city buildings, possibly in the school, if people are able to set up, you know, if they have a television screen in their front lobby of the business or something like that, we would love to be able to have those videos just kind of widespread and available for people to view in passing. And so we would love if folks have the ability to do that and they would like to volunteer to have those videos posted in their place of business. We would love for that to happen as well. So please just reach out and we can hopefully, with the help of our communications director, get that going as well once we start the outreach process.
Are those videos, or can they be permanently on our, like the How Do I Vote page on our website?
They currently are.
They are there? Okay.
Yep. If you go to winooskivt.gov/vote, they're about halfway down.
Another location we might at least do pamphlets, the food shelf. I mean, check with the folks running that, but and then just wanted to let you all know, I did reach out to the director of the Partnership for Prevention. You know, pre-COVID, they used to do a candidate forum and community dinner. So I reached out to her to see if they do have like anything at all planned, or at least get that conversation going. Bryn?
Thank you. I was curious about, I gotta change the Zoom screen so I can see everybody. I was wondering about, so videos are exceptionally useful and have some good longevity. What type of accessibility do we have, or do we know in terms of internet access, computer access? So, you know, it's just what is the anticipated distribution or realized distribution of those videos?
I think anybody can access them via the links that Paul posted on the website. So as long as you have internet access or a smartphone or a device that is connected to whatever, cloud anywhere out there, you can watch and you can view the videos. So that means that and I know that we can circulate them on all of our social media, including WhatsApp and Twitter. And I know that the mayor just created a WhatsApp account as well that she's able to utilize to send city information. So that's an addition that we didn't have before as well.
Do we have a sense for how frequently the community would be able to access the internet, or is there a barrier there?
So
yeah, go ahead.
I can jump in. The 2019 census data, we had 77% of households with active internet subscription.
70.
I mean, there's certainly some households without.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, like, I know my internet, monthly internet rates and charges have gone up during the pandemic, and I'm just thinking about, we're creating resources that are available on the internet, but you have to have resources to be able to access the internet. So, so that's what I'm thinking. Like, this recommendation to saying, well, it'd be great if businesses or multifamily housing has these videos available in their lobby, and other locations have these available. Businesses have these available in their lobbies for access, but. I just wonder what the reality of that would be, as of having videos available other than just on our website, business.
Sorry about that. We plan on having them available at all of our city buildings, and we are going to hopefully partner with the school for them to be rolling in their, in their lobby with their TV that they have there. And so, we're hoping that with the way that people frequent, marketplaces, or, if people come into City Hall to pay a tax bill or whatever it is that they need, that they'll at least be available to see them there. They can play at the library as well, which is open, on every day of the week as well. So we will widely advertise the locations where those videos are going to be available if people want to view them and can't from home.
Okay, great.
I'll just mention quickly too, in addition, if I may, videos are just one tool in the toolbox. Obviously, there's an entire plan for printed materials in multiple locations. And certainly this is our first go. We're really leading the way in this initiative, in the state and quite frankly in the nation. So, there'll be some learning to do. Obviously, we're going to try to, approach it with a no stone unturned approach like we do with a lot of other big initiatives. We can consider an all city mailer as we've done before with other initiatives. The other thing I wanted to mention too is that we had some discussion about where the all resident voting information would be centrally located on the website. And at first we kind of thought, well, we could create like a whole dedicated page for getting information on all resident voting, but we all sort of landed on making sure that all of those resources and everything is available on the /vote page. So that's you can enter that page a couple different ways. You can get through the how do I menu on the homepage there. So how do I, and then vote in Winooski. It's also available through the clerk's office, and then it's easy to memorize for /vote. And then, the non-internet options for folks, that's where all the direct outreach comes in. When we go through print materials and work with our partners to connect with as many humans as possible.
I think it's worth noting that there will be a full page in the Winooski newsletter that is dedicated in January, that is dedicated to all of this information as well. And it's not this piece is not in the plan yet, because Paul and I had just started discussing it last week, trying to figure out a way for us to have the translated material that we're going to provide to folks in QR code versions for people because the newsletter goes out to all households. However, the newsletter itself is in English. And so we were trying to figure out a way to make that more accessible to non-English speakers or English language learners in the form of someone, if they have a smartphone or if they have a device or if they want to come borrow a device from the library, to click on the QR code and it pulls up the information in the language that they speak fluently. So that's something that I just wanted to mention that we are looking at being able to do. We haven't quite figured out the details around that yet, but we are working towards that.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. I hope you're able to pull this together. That would be really neat.
Yeah, that was all Paul.
Well, it takes a team. That's awesome.
For sure, and I think we're having these conversations about access every single day. I think in lieu of an official language access plan or any sort of language study, that's more robust than census data that happens every decade. I think we're gonna try to use every tool in the toolbox, as I mentioned before.
Awesome.
Are there any more questions from council? Any public comment? Remember, you can use the raise hand feature or the chat. Is there any additional feedback, Carol or Yaz, that would be useful to you? Or the questions you have for us right now?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. We don't really need to vote on this, but it says approval. So does anyone want to make a motion to approve the implementation update?
Second.
I didn't hear the motion. Who was that?
Oh, so move.
Yeah, okay. Motion by Jim, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone abstaining? Opposed?
Hey.
Motion carries. Thank you. It's 7:46. I want to call a 5-minute break. So let us reconvene at 7:51 p.m. Thank you. Any other? Excellent. All right, it is 7:51, so I will reconvene our meeting. We are on item D, which is on for approval. This is the fundraising policy that we saw at our last meeting. Angela made some changes based on our discussion.
Yep. Based on the council discussion at your last meeting, this policy has been updated to segregate the pieces where council approval is required to just specifically staff fundraising efforts. And we have included the option for people making a significant contribution of $2,500 or more to have the opportunity to come to council to be recognized. We did leave that as an option so that people could choose to remain anonymous if they wished. Those were really the biggest changes that were made, but happy to get any feedback.
Yeah, so to recap our last discussion, wanted to make sure this policy was focused more on staff efforts in fundraising and didn't create barriers for community members doing fundraising. Any questions from council? Does this new version meet the concerns raised last time? Potentially, I'm saying no hand. Are there any questions, comments from the public on this fundraising policy? Still no public in City Hall?
Nope.
No, there's nobody here.
Thank you. All right. Well, you have addressed the concerns we raised last time. I'm hearing no new concerns. Does someone want to move to approve the fundraising policy?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you, Angela. All right. So we are now on item E. This is the city manager search firm recommendation update. So at our last meeting, we looked at 4 different search firm proposals brought forward by staff, had some discussion about them, kind of came to consensus on one, GovHR, and then decided to go ahead and interview search firms. So Jim, myself, Yaz, and Phoebe, our HR director, and Wendy, our interim manager, participated in those interviews. We met with MRI, who shared that they actually didn't even have capacity to take on our search at this time. We met with GovHR, we met with Alliance. Polyhire withdrew from consideration after viewing our meeting. We're concerned about some of the conversation and them potentially us not being a good fit to work together. And we also reached out to another firm that had recently filled the manager position in Brattleboro. However, they also did not have capacity to take on the search at this time. So we shared the linked memo from the September meeting that kind of outlined our previous process, shared that with them in advance, and this set of questions to just guide a conversation. So we have worn an executive session here to have a discussion if y'all want to get into like what we learned, how those interviews went. Jim, Yas, Phoebe, want to add anything to that overview intro? Okay. Because this is part of the appointment, employment or evaluation of a public officer employee, in these conversations, we touched on previous search. I think probably these firms also might have, been sharing some proprietary information with us. So due to that and state statute section 313, does someone want to make a motion to find that we should have this conversation in executive session?
I moved.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Mike. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Could I have a motion to enter into executive session, inviting our interim manager, equity director, and HR director? to join us.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. So we're going to move to another Zoom line for the executive session. We're only going to discuss the search firm recommendation. Then we're going to come back to this line and then potentially, take a vote or a motion on that recommendation. Do you all have the link ready? Are you ready to move? Anyone need it? Waiting for Jim still. Bryn, Wendy, you guys are gonna get some exercise tonight.
Are we?
We're having multiple executive sessions, so there'll be some more movement.
All right.
Yeah, my digital exercise.
Are those all going to be the same ID and passcode?
We're using that same one. Right, Wendy? I believe that's the only one we have.
Yes, and I'm
Yes.
contacting the person who will be in the second one to let him know to start signing on.
Okay, great. All right, so we're back in from executive, and I am looking for a motion to approve staff to contract with GovHR for our search firm. And should that not work out, to be able to then contract with Alliance as a secondary option. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries.
Mayor,
May I just ask a question? Is the authority, the dollar value of the proposals? The authority to contract for the dollar value that was
Yeah.
proposal?
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I guess should have come out higher, we will revisit that. But. So we are done with the regular part of the agenda. We're now on item 9, executive session. So we have another one to discuss confidential attorney-client communications. Looking for a motion to find under state statute 3131F that we should have this discussion in executive session to receive professional legal services from our attorney.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Hal, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So then I need a motion to move into executive session, inviting our attorney, Bob DePalma, and our interim manager, Wendy Harrison. Anyone else, Wendy? That's it?
I think that's it.
Okay.
So moved.
second.
Motion by Jim, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. We will move back into executive session to discuss this matter. Would it be appropriate, could we do 2 motions and just go over there and handle both of these items? Or we should come back out? No, we have to come back out.
You have to come back out if you're going to take
A vote, yep.
action. I don't know that you will be taking. Oh, yes, you will be, actually.
Yeah, okay. So we're just gonna talk about item B, and then we'll come back here, and then we'll do another one for the last time. So I will see you in the other Zoom line.
probably be 3 separate motions too.
Ooh.
Hey, Wendy, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think I was the meeting host, and when I left, the call ended. Could you text Bob?
Yeah, I didn't hear the first part of what you said.
I believe when I left, the Zoom meeting ended, so he'll have to rejoin.
Okay.
If you could alert him, please. Thank you. Sorry for the delay. I'm just waiting to receive our legally approved language. Wendy, did you get an email yet?
No, I haven't, and I'm refreshing frequently. Oh, here it goes. Did you get it?
No, not yet. There it is. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to read this resolution and then we'll be seeking a motion to resolve that the council appoints the mayor and the interim city manager to serve as a litigation committee to provide guidance and direction to council on interim steps in the lawsuit brought against the city in connection with the all resident voting charter provision. The committee is authorized to make decisions concerning the litigation and direct council in furtherance of those decisions, reserving to the full council all major decisions concerning the litigation, including any decision to settle the litigation. Also resolved that the council hereby ratifies and approves the filing of the motion to dismiss presently on file with the court and all steps taken thus far incident thereto. And resolved that the council hereby authorizes council to grant an extension of time to January 7th, 2022 for the plaintiffs to file a response to the city's motion to dismiss. Would someone like to move to approve that resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Hey,
Motion carried. Thank you very much. So we can move on to item C. This is an executive session to receive an update per state statute section 3131A about lot 9 and development agreement contracts. So looking for a motion to find that. Having this discussion in open session would put us at a disadvantage, put the city at a disadvantage. And so we should, per state statute, hold this discussion in executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bryn, second by Jim. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. So I'm looking for a motion to enter into executive session, inviting our interim manager, John Rauscher, and Eric
Yes.
Borwell, as well as our attorney, Bob DePalma. Can I have a motion, please?
Move.
Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. We're going to move over to another Zoom line for this conversation. We'll discuss only this item, and then we'll return to this line to adjourn. No further business will take place.